Okay, so now we're being recorded. Thanks, Patty.
Our objectives this afternoon is really to focus on the PBIS Classroom Foundations, the ones that we're very familiar with, but really taking that to the virtual teaching environment. So we're going to look at the new normal now of those guiding principles and talk about a student success formula for a PBIS virtual classroom. We're going to explore settings, expectations, and routines, things that we're probably all familiar with, but show examples how we could be using those in our virtual teaching classroom and really provide opportunities within the hour for us to practice together and listen to what other people are doing. We'll end with a self-reflection of what's going on in your virtual teaching scenario. Our expectations today, we're going to start with the Zoom behavior. We're going to be respectful. Barb talked about everybody muting themselves. And then in the chat box, please use that. We encourage that to ask questions, anything we need to clarify, put that in there as well. We hope that everybody is continuing to use the Safe at Home protocol. And physical distancing. And every time I hear that word, that just conjures up more stress and anxiety for me. So with that in mind, we know everybody is physical distancing, but what we want to do is be responsible. And today we want to increase our social emotional connections with everybody here, all 100 and plus of you guys.
Oh, like we're over 200 now. I'm keeping you updated.
Oh, over 200. So how can we increase our social emotional connections? We're going to try to be doing this in our Zoom breakout rooms, and we'll be talking about how we'll be responsible in those rooms.
So as we move into this new world of distance learning, and maybe for some of you, you've been doing this in the past, but it's certainly new for a lot of us. We want to offer this mantra for us, these things to remind ourselves as we move into this new virtual classroom. And that's to try to use what you've already been using. We're going to go in more depth what that means when we talk about your behavior matrices. Make sure we're keeping it clear and simple. Do the best you can right now while planning to meet the needs of every student. So I don't see how those two go together, but we're going to do all we can in order to be able to meet the kids of our kids in these virtual classrooms. And one way to do that is to make sure we're building those relationships, and that the relationships and the well-being of our students right now is going to take a bit of a priority over the assignment and the behavioral compliance. Here's some good examples of what some of our teachers are doing to take advantage of what's happening. So here's a teacher who decided to integrate and get creative with her lesson plans with what's going on in today's environment for a math class. And here's an example of a teacher who's looking for new resources for how to plan, and also some new clothes. Our guiding principles that we're going to use in the virtual classroom, our new normal, are the same ones that we have in our PBIS work. We're going to be working on predictability, flexibility, connections in those relationships, and empowerment. And so predictability, what we really mean is that right now we want to set up virtual classrooms that continue to be safe, predictable, and positive. And it's really going to be important in this COVID-19 world that we're able to do that for our students. Those loss of our typical habits that we have that we are so great at setting up in school is going to cause some emotional instability with a lot of our kids and their families. So by working to create those routines, we might be able to add that back for them. We're going to talk about how to do that with your virtual classroom and making sure that we are connecting with our kids, more importantly than almost anything else that we're doing. And then the flexibility piece is that certainly during this time of uncertainty and change, a lot of our students and our families are going to feel a loss of control. And so if we are inflexible in our teaching, we may just trigger some of the trauma that's going on because of the COVID-19 work. So please remember that while our physical classrooms add a lot of uniformity to them, we might have to be paying attention to the fact that kids are in learning environments now that are really different and very unpredictable. So we may not be able to ask the same of them at all times. So we have to be somewhat flexible in what we're doing. And Cristy, you want to talk about the connections and relationships?
Because right now, fostering relationships should be our priority. We should be thinking about what we're already been doing and how we can enhance our relationships with our kids. Anything that we can do virtually. If we've had routines in place, how can we then go in depth with checking in with our kids? Not so much having us build that relationship with our kids, but for not to forget that our kids need to connect with each other and continue to build their social relationships. And we have to have our families involved as well. So how can we cultivate that now in this new world that we're navigating? When we think about empowerment and we think about trauma, trauma takes away our power. And if we think about our kids right now, it's more important that we give them the opportunity to make their own decisions, to give them authentic choice, than to be able to have these rigid expectations for them. We should just drop our power struggles. They're not worth it right now. And our kids really need to feel like they are in control. So how do we do that in a virtual teaching environment? I want to talk a little bit more about the relationship building that we can do in this new setting that we're all experiencing. Distance learning is that, distance learning. So how do you build relationships when you don't have that human energy coming back at you? I think that that's really something new for me. And to do this presentation is so difficult because I want to see everybody's face and I want to like see people like smiling or having those like question marks that show up on their facial expressions. But what we can do is look at what we have already been doing in the routines that we've set in place in our classrooms. How can we build relationships during those routines? I know a lot of you came to the California PBIS conference and Dr. Sugai talked about greeting at the door. And that's an evidence-based practice where we can greet kids virtually to empower them, knowing that they are here and we can have relationship building opportunities. The document it's a brief that's up on pbis.org. It's also one of our resources. I would suggest that reading that document just inspires us to think, how can we be greeting our kids virtually? And everybody is so creative in order to do that. We'll be able to do that.
Some of us can interrupt just a second right here too. We had a question come through on the chat room because right now the PowerPoint is up there as a PDF for taking notes. But we want to let you know as soon as we're done, we're going to send this to our webmaster for the California Coalition, and we will upload this video. And almost everything Cristy and I are saying are also in the notes section of these videos, as well as you'll find everything in the written materials. But you'll be able to have access to both of those probably by the end of today. I'm sorry, go ahead, Cristy. You're on morning meeting.
That's all right. I just want to just go through just suggestions. You already know them. We have morning meetings. A lot of you even have restorative circle meetings. How do you do that virtually and take that opportunity to build relationships with your kids? And what I have said earlier, for kids to continue to go deeper and build relationships with each other. The check-ins, I love check-ins. That's just having just a prompt of how you're feeling today or emojis that you can relate to and be able to talk about that experience and how you're feeling. Each day we feel different, our kids feel different. We can set up communication routines virtually for our kids to connect with each other. Having pen pals, we can have letters that kids can write and send to each other. I don't even think they know how to do that anymore. I don't even think they know how to put a stamp on an envelope. But what a great way for them to relate to each other. We have the opportunity with technology like today to have virtual tables or breakout rooms and have kids who don't normally talk to each other, be able to have that opportunity. And again, it's our parents that we want to set up a routine to build relationships with. What a great time to connect with parents, and how difficult it must be for our parents right now. So they may want to like get a message like, how are you doing at home? That's just reassuring for them. And we can't forget any routine that addresses emotions, because emotions matter right now. We've got to have emotional literacy, vocabulary for kids to talk about, and to give them opportunities to understand how to self-regulate. And we'll be doing some additional routines about SEL later on this month.
So as we're moving through this virtual classroom, we want to make sure that we're also paying attention to what we already know about our student success formula. What we know with PBIS really helps. And that's that we want to define, teach, and be able to practice the behaviors that we want to see. So now we're going to talk about how do we define, teach, and practice those virtual behaviors that we would like to see. We want to make sure that we're adding a routine in our classroom expectation matrix that's called telelearning or virtual school, whatever you're calling your virtual classroom, so that it is one of the routines that's on our classroom matrix. And after we've refined our expectations, we want to make sure in our new settings that we're going to explicitly teach those and give multiple opportunities for kids to practice and to respond to those so that we can give them acknowledgments for meeting those expectations. So in that formula, we need to make sure that we're taking the time that's needed for teaching students these new schools and expectations. And we want to teach them specifically how to use those different features. Many of you probably have already experienced this as you started teaching about 3 to 4 weeks ago using virtual. But make sure you're including your matrix and you're teaching them how to do the hand raising, how to do the chat features and the reactions in the same way that we taught our routines in our classrooms.
So my anxiety is reduced knowing that those practices in my classroom are the same practices I can use virtually, because those are evidence-based PBIS practices. If you are not familiar with the supporting and responding to behavior document, we have that resource on the handout, and it goes through the foundation practices, the prevention practices, and the response practices that you'll find in the classroom. Today, we're just talking about the foundations that we should set up in your physical classroom. In the physical classroom, we talk about setting, we talk about expectations, and we talk about routines. And we look at those first before we look at our prevention and response practices. So be thinking about what you're doing in your physical classroom, or what you did in your physical classroom, that we can now be thinking about applying in the virtual PBIS classroom. So when we think about settings, we need to have our kids feel safe, have an environment that's very predictable and respectful of each kid's personal space. With expectations, we want to have those established so that kids can feel very capable and worthy, that they're able to do the work with behavioral expectations. They also provide the routines and procedures, the consistency for our kids to feel like this environment is safe. They know what's going to happen. And more importantly, it's really our behavior. If we're consistent, our predictable adult behavior gives our kids a sense of security. So with foundations, what we're trying to do is reduce the stress of the unknown and set a foundation for calm, both in our physical and virtual class. Oh, and here I just love these pictures. So how can we do that? These guys, look at, they're all smiling. I can't believe that we're doing virtual teaching and we're really loving it. I mean, because it's like the most stressful thing when we're thrown at, we didn't even know like tomorrow we were going to do it, and here we are. So all these teachers are really giving this whole sense of kids feeling safe, having the picture behind you that's your classroom, Having your morning meetings with the bulletin board that you did every single day before we went to virtual teaching. The teacher in the upper right, she actually had the kids send her pictures that they drew, and then she posted them behind her so the kids could see their work. So I just thought that that was really beautiful, and we really need to consider what's our virtual background about to provide that sense of calm for our kids. And somebody earlier I saw in the chat wanted to know where we were able to create those virtual backgrounds. And Patty, you can like maybe in the notes tell them how to go about doing that.
This is pretty fun. And one of the things I was thinking about, well, some of us, I know with my own grandchildren, had 1 day's notice and you weren't allowed back in your classroom. So you might have to call the custodian or whoever's still on campus and say, go take pictures of my classroom and send them to me, because I'm not sure we all have access to that anymore. So we're going to have an opportunity for some chatting right now, about 5 minutes. So what we want to do is think about your own settings. How are you designing your virtual classroom? It's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. As Cristy mentioned, we've been doing this a little bit now. Not we, you all have been doing this for a little bit. What are some things that you have found that meet the criteria, those settings, those foundations, that facilitate the most typical instructional activities, that allow for some smooth teacher and student movement back and forth? Remember that whole relationship building piece. And assure that those instructional materials are organized and accessible. Is Alexa actually being able to help you or not? And then posting, how do you post your critical support materials? So take some time now. We'll spend 5 minutes here, maybe 4 minutes now because I took too long to explain it. And list some of those in the chat room. And then as Patty sees them, she's going to break in and maybe bring up a few of them to make sure we're all paying attention to that. And remember, these will be recorded. So you'll be able to see what everybody was saying when you take a look at the video.
And remember, this is about the virtual classroom. So if you're not in a virtual classroom right now, be thinking about ideas that you could share.
So people are telling us, this is Patty, that they're mailing home packets. There's been a lot of conversation, Barb and Cristy, about how we actually get kids to log in. And so there's questions around technology, but what's that, motivation perhaps, I think is what's the thread here around getting kids to actually log in. Some good conversation about helping families create schedules.
I want to add to that. One of the things that I read while we were researching for all of this is a teacher who commented that she had really low response rates for kids signing up to come to the classroom. And she started just making very fast phone calls home and inviting and making sure parents knew. And she raised her participation rate up to like 97% in just a week's time. So I know that's a lot of extra work, but it was one of the ideas that somebody had to increase that interaction with their students at home.
Quite a few people are reminding us that they are only doing pencil and paper because so many of their students don't have internet technology or the technology to work virtually at home. So quite a few people have reminded us of that.
And I think there's also been some schools that have had some issues with not being sure they want to be that open with their students being online without it being able to be monitored as well until everybody learns how to do that. So there might be that issue to take into consideration as well.
Yeah, and Wendy offered us a great idea to, she recorded herself and uploaded it to their class app. And there's some fantastic ideas and conversations in the chat going so quickly. So make sure you capture this when you get the recording.
Okay, we're going to return back from the chat. or at least I'm going to move on to the next thing that we're going to talk about. However, if you're still chatting, go right ahead, because remember, as Patty said, it's going to be captured, and we're going to come back in a little while for something new. Cristy, you want to talk a little bit about the matrix?
So in our PBIS world, we all know about our school-wide classroom matrix. We really need to be taking that matrix in the classroom if you haven't done it already. Our physical classroom should have a classroom matrix that really reflects how you teach in that classroom. So when we talk about just your classroom's physical teaching matrix, there are keys, essential keys to really consider. And so you may have developed one and now you can refine it. And if you haven't developed one, these are some real good key features to follow. The first thing is that with anything, we need to frame why we're doing it. So if we haven't told the kids why we have a teaching matrix or why we're going to have a teaching matrix, we need to be thinking about that. What will be the purpose of that teaching matrix? And the second thing would be the idea that we as a teacher don't do the matrix and give it to our students, that we need to be doing it together. Our students need to have a voice for buy-in and add to the teaching matrix so that they can see and hear the language on the matrix that reflects their voice. When we teach the pro-social behavior, we want to make sure it's observable, measurable, positively stated, understandable, and applicable. And we're teaching kids what that is if we do it together. We want to then teach the matrix. Posting it on our wall is very difficult to see because it's always super tiny, but we want to be able to make the matrix come alive. So we want to be able to apply the language in everything that we do. The slide before that talks about another key feature, which is acknowledgement. We can use the language of the matrix to acknowledge or use behavior-specific praise. So for the Wilson way, if we see a student who hasn't been turning in their homework and turns in their homework when they're entering the class, we can say, wow, thanks for being responsible when you came into class today. You turned in your homework. I didn't have to make that up in the moment. I could be using the language of the matrix as my behavior-specific praise. Because remember, whatever you feed will grow. Prompting, another way we can use the language of the matrix to remind kids using the same language to set our kids up for success. So what do we do when we enter the classroom? Make sure you're responsible and turn in your homework. When we respond to misbehaviors in the classroom, again, it's the power of the matrix. We can use the language that the kids have created to be able to redirect kids, to be able to have error correction. And we all know what that language is. It's part of our classroom. And we must respond to misbehaviors in a way that will empower our students to change their behavior. We need to respond in a way that teaches resiliency in our kids. And the last piece is what we all want, and that's our kids to monitor their own behavior. And what a powerful tool the matrix is, that kids can do their own self-monitoring, self-check-in of how they're doing with classroom behaviors that have been established with the whole class.
So when we're talking about setting up your behavior matrix for remote instruction, there is a brief that's on the PBIS.org website that really goes into more detail what I'm going to talk about now that you can take a look at. But basically, we want to make sure we're keeping the same school-wide behavior expectations, that we use those different online activities as our new settings, and that we consider online specific behaviors that we need to teach. So what is it we need to start with? One of them might be teaching them how to sign on. That might be some of those phone calls home, but how do we get them to participate explicitly with using it as a lesson? And then we want to teach how to directly teach how to avoid the temptation to simply post or share your virtual matrix. So we really want to teach kids how to use that matrix, not just put it up there, but what do they need to do about it? And that's, as Cristy mentioned earlier, we're going to do together with them. So here's a couple examples, and then they are part of that brief that's on the pbis.org website. And this is an elementary school example where they chose the entering class, the teacher-led whole group instructions and one-on-one and small group activities in those breakout rooms. So they even used the same setting titles, but specific to the breakout room. So again, don't have to worry about writing all these down. You'll find them in the brief, and then you'll have access to this PowerPoint as soon as we're done today. This is a middle school example, a secondary example. So again, even if you're with us and you're one of the high schools, know that this is an important thing to do. You know that if you're a PBIS school, whether you're in elementary, middle, or in high school. So here's an example. They used their saying preparation, respect, integrity, discipline, and effort. And they talk specifically about distance learning and technology. So you can see they set their settings a little differently, not as discreetly as they did with the elementary. So make sure we're paying attention to those developmental levels for our kids. So we're going to move into going into the breakout rooms. And this will be part of that forgiveness business. If I don't set it up right, this is my first breakout room experience, and I don't do math well, but we're going to see what we can do. In our breakout room, what we're going to ask you to do is you're going to be randomly assigned to a group. And in that group, quickly introduce yourself, you know, just your name and maybe what grade level you teach. You'll need to turn on your microphone. You'll need to make sure your video is back on. If you're in your jammies, watch out. And you will be asked to think about just the breakout room setting. So just in the breakout room setting, what would you look like? What would you see and hear if you were being respectful, being safe, and being responsible? You're going to have about 8 minutes to do that activity. And then we're going to ask each breakout room to just post one item that they did, that they came up with, one operationalized definition. We all know what that means now. So let me get this set up. And I think we've got over 205 people. So let's see what I can do here. Hold on, I'm going to go in the background and get this set up.
In the meantime, we have 99 chats. So I think it's real important that we go back and learn from each other some of the responses.
Okay, we're going to go into 25 different rooms, and you're going to have about 8 to 9 people in a room. And let's go for it and see what happens here. Oh, one thing.
5 minutes, right?
They're going to have about 7 minutes, but I'm going to give you a 1-minute warning. When it's time to come back, it'll show up that you've got 1 minute, and just hang tight because I think I have to go out and come back in, so things happen, but don't hang up on me. All right. Have a good time in your chat rooms. I believe all of you have been invited. Oh boy, so yeah, that's that. I believe everybody should be back. And I have to stop sharing. And if you're all back, go ahead and turn your microphones off again.
And Barb, we'll want to see your PowerPoint, and there was we were considering having everyone share something they came up with in the chat. Is that correct?
Yes, we were. So do you see the PowerPoint?
We do now.
Okay, well now it's not moving forward, however, so let me do this again. Can't get it to move. Can you facilitate the conversation of what they might be sharing in their chat room while I figure this out?
Sure, we'll wait for people to post there. So people were saying, paying attention to the speaker, respectful was goal-oriented, goal-focused. What else? Making sure we take turns and waiting for other statements. So I'm thinking waiting for everyone to finish what they have to say. Staying on the designated website or app. There's actually a feature on Zoom that you can see what other, like behind the scene for students. We still are looking for your PowerPoint there.
Okay.
Schedule a time of day to do your work. Find a space at home to do your work, desk, table. Keep your login private.
Good things to share. So why don't we keep
Absolutely.
sharing them as we move forward so that we can, again, be able to see those. But for the sake of being done within an hour, we're going to go ahead and move forward. So are you seeing the change in the screen right now, the PowerPoint?
No, don't see the PowerPoint just yet.
Don't see the PowerPoint just yet. Okay, so hold on. Let me find out what I didn't do. Do it again.
You know, while you're looking for that, Barb, I was just going to say a lot of people were concerned about using personal phone numbers and push personal social media sites earlier, and so there were some great suggestions on how to avoid having your own personal kind of contact information.
Okay.
We
So
see your video now. I mean, we see your PowerPoint.
You see my PowerPoint now. Okay, good. All right. So we'll keep sharing those ideas with each other. And again, just want to remind everybody about this brand new brief, March 2020, that the National Center has put together for all of us on creating that teaching matrix for remote instruction. So they're wonderful that we have those partners. Cristy? Did we lose her? We might have lost her. So I'm going to let you know that in the handout that you...
No, I'm back. I just had to unmute myself.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
I was too busy talking about the wonderful group that I was in my breakout room, and I didn't want to leave them. And I really just wanted to say to them, I really feel bad that we were just cut short. So I got all stressed out over that. So I just want to go back and say, I'm feeling better now. I made these wonderful connections, and now you guys are gone. So I think we should all reach out to each other. I think it's just been a great support group for me. So thank you. And you had beautiful ideas. We really want to have you reflect only on the foundations in this particular Zoominar or webinar that we're participating in. We're talking about foundations, but the big picture of PBIS practices are something that we can do when we're managing our virtual classroom. So we have another webinar coming up on Wednesday that is about the prevention practices. And then I do know that someone asked about collecting behavioral data. And so I'll send out a message to be able to talk about what webinar might address that. I'd have to look at the titles again. I do know that there's going to be a social emotional practice webinar coming up for the virtual classroom. And then somebody had talked about families and how to connect with families. And we'll be doing the home virtual connection webinar at the end of the month as well. So we'll show you at the end some of the titles that will kind of help answer any of the questions that we can't answer in this particular webinar.
I think Patty has a website that she'd like to mention too right here.
Yeah, if you could go back to, I'd like to do a suggestion from my breakout room. Somebody had said from Oakland, and I forgot your name, they use silent signals, and I loved that. And so we can't see each other, but we can do silent signals like, you know, thumbs up, thumbs down. But maybe you can do that just for yourself right now in this particular reflection. So the first thing that we want to be able to ask ourselves in a virtual classroom using PBIS Foundation and prevention practices, do I provide support for students and family to access that virtual space? So just think about that, thumbs up, thumbs down to yourself. Do you use procedures for teaching? Kind of what we were just talking about. Do I use specific behavior-specific praise to acknowledge student who are meeting their expectations? Do I use pre-correction to support student success in the lesson and any virtual skills they would need? Do I allow enough wait time for students to ask questions and share comments? Do I reinforce students throughout the virtual lesson? And do I remind students of opportunities to use skills taught as part of our social component? So if you've been doing social skill training like self-regulation or calming strategies, decision-making skills, are you providing opportunities for kids to use those skills? And do you consider your students' academic, behavioral, and emotional needs in the lessons or activities that you plan? And I think most important one is, do you check for understanding using the chat feature, which we're trying to do today? So kind of walking our talk right.
I might be doing some of these myself for today, like up, and some of them are sideways and some of them are down. So that was a good thing for us to check as well when we're working with all of you.
Yeah. And so the next are some guiding questions. And these are really takeaways for you just to be thinking about your work. I say do this during your non-essential work time. So whatever that is, I don't know, because everything we do is essential. Anyway, how will you ensure that every student has access to the grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, and deep engagement, and high expectations? And remember the mantra that we started with, because we don't want to stress ourselves out or our kids. So go back to the very beginning of what we said we should all be thinking about. This is our mantra. And I'm not going to tell you what that is because I want you to go back and read that. The second question to consider is, what early indicators, like right now, can we gather to really tell ourselves of what we're doing working with our kids? Are our kids attending? Yeah, what did we do to get them to attend? What's working, what's not working for not only our students, but our families, our caretakers, and just our peers that we left behind. So are we still working in grade level meetings? Do we have departments that we can collaborate with? And the last one is my favorite. How are you de-stressing, right? So do you know what stress spelled backwards is? Okay, never mind, I won't tell you that, but okay. And supporting healthy regulation strategies for your students.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to do that backwards in my brain. All right, so for today, we really do want to collect some information. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead here. You did say that you were inviting them to self-reflect on this. Want anybody post things in the chat room right now, or just for them to do on their downtime?
Just on your non-essential time. And Stressed spelled backwards is de-stress, is dessert.
Oh, I see. Thank you. I was trying to do that. It wasn't working out for me.
I know.
All right. So as you're thinking about those thoughts, we would like you to share your thoughts and give us some information about how to payment. And there is the QR code right there. If you want to put your phone on it, it'll take you to it and fill out the evaluation. One of the things why we really would like you to participate in that is the very last questions is going to ask you, what is it you want more of? So it may be that you want a whole hour spent on the matrices or a whole hour spent on one particular thing. We're going to show you the rest of the webinars that are coming up for this month. We were able to get really all of April filled with different webinars. And we're going to be starting on May and possibly June, it looks like these days, with the information that we're getting from the national level about when schools might return. And so we're really going to be looking for things you want to go deeper in when we're taking a look at May and June, so we can keep these webinars up, keep this conversation happening between all of us, experts in this field. So please do complete the evaluation. If you're doing it now, great. If you're doing it later, there's the URL for it. Again, we'll put the PowerPoint up so you'll be able to access it as well. But when you can, please turn that in and skip right to the fifth question for sure. Yes.
Yeah, can I interrupt you? Because the QR code that's posted actually goes to the wrong form. So if people could just use that tiny URL, the other one goes to the Santa Clara ones from.
Oh, they didn't change it. So sorry. I thought
the QR code, but I did put that link in the chat box, so people should be able just to click on it right now.
Okay, good. So just click on the link in the chat box. Yeah, forget that QR code. And fortunately, that's been the only really big glitch we had today, except for some people from back east who joined us this morning at 10. We appreciate them, and I hope they came back this afternoon to be with us. So
If I could just plug one more thing, because there's been so many questions about, oh, how'd you do breakout rooms? How'd you raise your hand? Zoom has little short, little tiny webinars you can watch, tutorials. So if you liked the features that Cristy and Barb were using, just go to the zoom.us site and you can get a lot of support with that.
And honestly, they're pretty easy. So that a lot happens behind the scenes on this app, because it was really pretty easy to do. All right.
Oh, pay attention. Molly is offering support for tech, looks like.
Oh, Molly. Everybody write down Molly's address. Molly, there's 166 of us still left on this webinar.
Thank you, Molly.
So you might be careful about what address you post. Cristy, you might about talk about the recognition system. Cristy, are you there? Okay.
I had to unmute myself, sorry.
Oh, there she is, okay.
I was talking to myself, telling everybody about our fabulous California PBIS recognition system. This year, we are having a major update, of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we're going to be doing is having schools participate. I'm just going to read what we're supposed to be reading. So in closing, I want to let you all know that the California PBS Coalition values your work in school climate. We understand that your priorities are with supporting your students, families, and community in response to this unprecedented event. For this reason, the CPC has made the difficult decision to forego the California PBIS recognition system for the 2019-2020 school year. In its place, the CPC will be providing an alternative acknowledgement process to highlight the heartfelt work of schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. Honoring the positive impact schools are playing in the lives of California's students, families, and communities, the CPC will recognize all schools that are providing services and supporting during these challenging times. The CPC has developed a 1-year only California PBIS Community Cares. It's an acknowledgement to honor schools and community partners in this important work. To request acknowledgement for your school site and or to nominate community organizations for the California PBIS Community Cares recognition this year, please visit pbisca.org. Select the recognition tab and share your story with us by June 30th, 2020. If you have additional questions, please do not hesitate to contact your regional PBIS Technical Assistance Center or the CPC directly, because we appreciate all that you do. I do want to add that PBISapps.org just sent out a nice article on how we can continue to take the tiered fidelity inventory this year, which is a measure that we had used in the past for a recognition system, but it's also how school teams can really validate the great work that they're doing by doing their post-assessment of the tiered fidelity inventory. So I'd encourage you to read how you can do that virtually. You can Zoom it, which is pretty cool.
So in closing, we also want to remind everybody about the California PBIS conference. Now it is going to be September 21st through the 23rd because there's a post-conference as well that'll be all-day workshops. And the proposals for this are due on May 29th. We are still on go that we're going to do this conference. We're making backup plans in case we need to, but it looks like we're going to be able to have this a go. You'll probably have to be thinking about how do you do transportation and all of that, because school's going to start up very differently than it started up in the past, and this happens pretty quickly in September. When you do look on the PowerPoint and you get it live, you'll be able to see that there's a URL right there. You click on that, and that's how you submit your proposal. If you don't want to come back here to do that, just go to the California PBIS Coalition website, and you'll be able to click on the conference and be able to find out how to submit your proposal.
It's 2 o'clock.
And last, we have just a reminder of what all the upcoming events are. The ones that are highlighted here are the ones that are going to be kind of a continuation of what we've started this conversation to be about, moving into the prevention practices, the social-emotional, and then how do you do social-emotional behavioral skills at home as well. For more information, be sure to visit pbiscalifornia.org. Sometimes it won't come up. You might have to type in actually PBIS or California PBIS Coalition, and you'll be able to get their reminders about the conference. And a special thank you to really Stephanie Tague at the California Santa Clara County Office of Education for having this vision and getting this started a few weeks ago, just in her region, in her county, and asking the rest of us to jump on board. So we appreciate the work that she did. We want to thank you for joining us today. And there was a question about being able to get, let's see, where did it go? Be able to get a certificate of attendance for today. I don't know about that. So I will check with the rest of the technical assistance centers. We will figure something out, and you'll be able to find whatever the answer is to that on the website, the California PBIS website.
I also want to add a thank you to all of you and the work that you're doing, providing safe, predictable, positive environments, no matter what the environment is for all of our kids. Could be your home environment. And we do have a resource page on our website, pbiscaltac.org, that's constantly being updated. So check out the resource tab and you'll see some COVID-19 resources. And the PowerPoints will be there for you too.
And I just learned from someone in the room that there are 3 little dots on your chat on the bottom right. And if you click those, it will save the chat to your home computer. then you have all those links and resources. So thanks
Wow.
to whoever posted that. I learned something for sure.
Yeah, we're going to put that in our next webinar on Wednesday. Hope you join us
Oh, look
then.
at that. I hope you all see it. I just put in the middle of the screen. I'm not going to hang up yet so that we all have time to hit those 3 little buttons on the bottom and save chat so you can have it saved to your own. Thank everybody for attending. We hope you are able to learn from each other as well as making sure you know some of the resources that are coming out of our National Center. We look forward to seeing you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us.
When I hit stop record.
I'm trying to find stop record. I found it.